"Who is she?" Professor Franklin Moore screamed in the boardroom. "A janitor? Solving a $10 million problem like she's playing Sudoku?" The whiteboard bore a massive equation. In the lower corner, a line of chalk. Delicate, neat, completely unlike the scribbles of the brilliant minds who had failed here. 5 PhDs, 14 weeks, 237 failures. A janitor walks in and in 5 minutes she rewrites mathematical history. No degree, no lectures. No one believed her until they saw the solution. Security camera footage comes up. A woman in janitor's clothes stands in front of the board, chalk in hand, alone, steady. Rosa Matthews, the woman the academic world overlooked, until she made them bow their heads. The wall clock struck 11:47 p.m. as Rosa Matthews pushed her cleaning cart down the 4th-floor hallway of the Langford Institute of Science. The building was so quiet, the soft squeak of her rubber wheels echoed on the tile floor. Behind the door to room 412, the lights were still on. Fluorescent light spilled through the door crack like a final smear of hope. Rosa glanced through the small window. Inside were 5 people, wrinkled shirts, loose ties, bloodshot eyes, and a whiteboard filled with markings like a cursed ancient map. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls of room 412 were painfully thin. 14 straight hours, and we haven't moved a single line, someone cried out in despair. "We're about to lose the Institute of Mathematics." Another voice broke. "If we don't show progress in tomorrow's briefing, Langford will reallocate funding to the engineering department." Rosa lowered her head, her hand tightening on the broomstick. She wasn't a professor, she wasn't a student. She didn't belong here. But she understood what they were saying, and she had been quietly following that equation for 3 months. Inside room 412, the air was thick, as if even the oxygen molecules had refused to stay. Professor Nina Caldwell stood up and slammed her pen on the table. "We've tried every modern mathematical approach. All of them." Dr. Victor Lee gripped his hair, eyes glued to the dense whiteboard. Symbols, functions, exponents, triple powers, equations dragged on by despair. At the center of the board, one name, Kessler conjecture, a problem considered the holy grail of modern number theory. Solving it meant $10 million in grants and global fame. Failure meant the Langford Institute of Mathematics would lose its funding. Dr. Aaron Blake sat motionless, eyes sunken from lack of sleep, hands clutching a cold coffee cup from hours ago. "I've published on undetermined parallel systems, and now I'm getting crushed like a freshman." "Maybe," Victor whispered. "We should just rest. Tomorrow's the final report. If not, this institute is gone." Outside the door, Rosa remained still. Sweat soaked her uniform collar, but her eyes never left the whiteboard. She had seen those equations every night, and she knew. They were looking the wrong way. Rosa Matthews, 28, stood alone in the empty Langford hallway, a school she cleaned every night but never belonged to. To most, she was just the late-night janitor, a familiar, quiet, blurry figure. People passed by her like she was a bench or a trash bin. No one knew Rosa had never attended college, that she grew up in Willow Creek, a worn-down neighborhood of dented tin roofs and sirens that sang her to sleep. Her father left when she was 10. Her mother worked 2 jobs, too busy to check homework or hear about the strange numbers that danced in Rosa's head each night. "She has a special gift," a 3rd-grade teacher once told her mother, "but without guidance, that talent will be buried." And buried it was. Rosa graduated high school with honors, but no one cared. No scholarships, no invitations, no future. She chose Langford because its library was open 24 hours, and an employee badge let her walk into a world she had only admired from afar. Each night, while the world slept, Rosa wiped ink from whiteboards, but not before memorizing every equation. In Rosa's world, math wasn't just numbers. It was escape. At 12, her father slammed the door and never came back. Her mother didn't cry, just returned to her night shift at the meat factory. From then on, Rosa learned silence. No complaints, no demands. She lived in the gaps, unpaid bills, meals without main dishes, and the ceiling fan clicking endlessly through summer. In a chaotic world, math was clear. 1 + 1 was always 2. No theorem ever betrayed her. Rosa started spotting patterns everywhere: house numbers on her school route, traffic light intervals, the stride lengths of strangers. While others played ball, she sat under trees with old notebooks, trying to solve quadratic equations no one had taught her. Afternoons at the public library were treasure. No one asked for ID, no one laughed when she held a Calculus Y book at age 15. And every time she returned home, she hid the books under her bed like sacred secrets shielding her from a crumbling life. No one ever discovered she was a genius, because no one ever looked long enough to see. Rosa didn't enter lecture halls like other students. She cleaned them. But each night, once the students left and the lights dimmed, she began her own classes. While wiping desks, she read abandoned notes. While emptying trash, she picked up discarded assignments, took them home, solved each problem, and graded herself like an imaginary judge. One night, she saw a board in room 312 covered in Fourier analysis symbols. She stood there for minutes, memorizing every line, then redrew it on the back of an old pizza box. Have you ever wanted something so badly that even touching leftover marker ink made your heart race? Have you ever studied in silence, with no recognition, no guidance, yet couldn't stop? Rosa learned from everything others threw away, and each night, each formula, she climbed a mountain no one saw, alone in the dark. For 3 months, after taking out trash and mopping floors, Rosa stood outside room 412's glass door, silently watching their futile efforts. She didn't hear it all, but the whiteboard spoke louder than words. Gradually, she noticed something. They were going the wrong way. Each team treated the Kessler conjecture as a complex advanced function. They forced it into classical frameworks, using grand models to explain what, to Rosa, felt intuitive. She began rewriting the equation at home, on cardboard and food wrappers. She tried switching variables, flipping base assumptions, rearranging steps. And one day, everything clicked. It's not that the problem is too hard, she thought. They're just too smart to see the simplest path. Was that arrogant? Maybe. But Rosa wasn't boastful. She just saw a path that those too familiar with the maze had missed at the first turn. That night, cold wind slipped through the hallway windows. Rosa stood alone outside room 412. Inside, the whiteboard remained untouched, full of tangled symbols, crossed-out guesses, circles, arrows. A battlefield tale of intellect abandoned. She walked in, slowly, like a stranger entering a shrine of knowledge. The scent of stale coffee, torn paper, and dry ink filled the air. She began her routine, gathering trash, wiping tables, straightening chairs, but her eyes never left the board. Then she stood still, chalk in hand. Her heart raced. One wrong move, and she'd be a fool. One correct line could change everything. Rosa took a deep breath. If I'm wrong, I'll erase it, like it never happened. But what if she was right? Would you dare to step forward and write what you believe is true, knowing the world might never forgive you? Rosa stepped toward the whiteboard like a soldier entering a battlefield. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes lit up, as if the entire world had gone silent, leaving only the chalk line and her heartbeat. The first line appeared. A variable moved effortlessly, instinctively. The second line, an assumption discarded. The third, a simple permutation no one had considered. Each chalk stroke flowed, smooth and decisive. No hesitation, no erasing. The solution unfolded from a mind that had silently connected every scattered dot over the past 3 months. No spotlight, no applause, just a whiteboard, a slender hand, and a brain the world had never truly seen. In under 5 minutes, Rosa stepped back, gazing at the completed solution nestled neatly in the bottom corner of the board. Accurate to the point of disbelief, simple to the point of irony, and beautiful. She clenched the chalk in her hand, uncertain of what she had just done. But she knew, if anyone read it, things would never be the same again. 6:15 a.m. Dr. Aaron Blake walked down the fourth-floor hallway with a cold coffee and a numb mind after 3 hours of desk napping. Today was the day he had to face the board and present failure. The door to room 412 was ajar. He couldn't remember whether he had locked it, but that didn't matter as much as what caught his eye when he stepped inside. He froze. The whiteboard was still there, but something was different. In the lower right-hand corner, blank just hours ago, now lay a series of clean, neat chalk lines, completely unlike the frantic scrawl above. His eyes scanned each line, then stopped. 1, 2, 3 steps to the solution. Aaron frowned, then his eyes widened. His heart began to race. The variables, the permutations, everything fit. He dropped his coffee. The crash of ceramic on tile rang out, but he didn't notice. He was staring at what 5 professors, hundreds of hours, and thousands of equations couldn't create. A solution. Correct. Clear. As beautiful as music. Who had written this? Aaron didn't waste time. 10 minutes later, he was in Langford's security office, still in shock. Room 412. From 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., he said, voice urgent. I need to see who went in. The security guard, a retired cop used to jumpy professors, nodded and typed quickly. Here it is, surveillance footage. The screen showed an empty room 412. They fast-forwarded past midnight, and then a woman in a blue janitor's uniform appeared, pushing a cleaning cart into the room. She's just a janitor, the guard said. Pause it, Aaron pointed. Rewind, right there. The footage reversed. Rosa approached the whiteboard, paused, and then picked up the chalk. The room went silent. On the screen, a slender black woman wrote line after line with absolute confidence. The guard whispered, Is she solving it? Aaron nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. And she finished it in under 5 minutes, he said. The question started forming in his mind, sharp and terrifying. Who is she? And how has no one ever known a mind like that? Less than an hour later, the third-floor meeting room of Langford's math department was packed. On the big screen, security footage of Rosa standing at the board, chalk in hand like a silent warrior's weapon. Dr. Nina Caldwell sat upright, eyes locked on every motion. Dr. Victor Lee exhaled as if struck in the chest. That's her? She wrote the entire solution? Victor asked, disbelief in his voice. No copying, no hesitating. She wrote like she's seen this answer 1,000 times. Aaron replied, remote in hand, replaying the footage. A deep voice came from the back. Professor Franklin Moore. We're sitting here with 5 PhDs, 10 international papers, and we got outdone by a janitor? No one answered. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they knew he wasn't wrong. That woman, who had quietly cleaned their classrooms for 3 years, had just written what they all believed. Impossible. The air turned heavy. We need to know her name, Nina said. Aaron had the answer. He pulled up the security system's personnel file and read slowly. Rosa Matthews, janitorial staff, working at Langford since May, 3 years ago. Night shifts, no violations, no absences, unnoticed. Silence filled the room. An earthquake had begun. 8:40 a.m. While the faculty board still reeled in disbelief, Aaron Blake searched the first-floor halls, scanning every door, every window. He couldn't wait any longer. Near the old dorms repurposed as storage, he stopped at the sound of a mop brushing across tile. The door was slightly open. Inside, Rosa was kneeling, scrubbing away mud left by the previous night's rain. Her curly hair tied back, old but clean gloves on her hands. Miss Matthews, Aaron called softly. Rosa jumped to her feet, startled. Her eyes widened, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'm Professor Aaron Blake," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. I saw what you wrote last night." Silence. "You solved the Kessler conjecture, didn't you?" Rosa clutched the cleaning rag so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked at him, but said nothing. "I'm not here to scare you. I just want to talk." A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. Then, in a voice so quiet he had to strain to hear, she said, "I wasn't sure I should write on that board, but I did. I didn't know anyone would see it." "See it?" Aaron echoed, devouring every word. Rosa lowered her head. "I just thought, if someone truly needed that solution, they'd know how to recognize it." Aaron and Rosa sat across from each other in a small break room at the end of the hall, an old room with a rattling coffee machine and flickering fluorescent light above. Rosa sat still, clutching a cup of water like it was the only real thing she could hold on to. Her eyes avoided his, while Aaron still couldn't look away from the woman who'd stunned the entire faculty. "Do you know what you just did?" he asked. "Solved a problem," Rosa replied quietly. "No, you solved a problem that 5 top universities failed at. Do you know what it is?" Rosa nodded slightly. "The Kessler conjecture. I heard the professors talking about it every night." "Where did you learn all this?" Aaron asked. Rosa gave a faint, dry smile. "From your trash." He froze. "Students throw away assignments, scratch paper, old photocopies. I picked them up. Some wrong, some right. I solved them all." "You've never been to college?" He still couldn't believe it. "Never, but I have the keys to clean an entire math institute." She looked up and met his eyes for the first time. "And I know, if I were someone else, that solution would have been framed and in the news last night." Aaron stared at her, silent. He didn't know whether to feel awe, shame, or fury on behalf of a genius mind that had been ignored for 3 years. But he knew one thing for certain. Rosa Matthews could no longer be invisible. "Do you know this changes everything?" Aaron asked, slow and steady. Rosa said nothing. Her eyes dropped to her cup, shoulders curling in as if still feeling the echo of last night's cold wind. "You've just opened an entirely new line of research. I want to introduce you to the board. They need to know who did this." Rosa looked up, not surprised, but wary. "Will they believe it?" she asked, soft but clear. "We have the footage, your handwriting, me." Rosa shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. I'm a black woman, a janitor. I never graduated college. To them, I'm not a promising mind. I'm a glitch in the system." Aaron sighed. He understood. Not just logically, but from the ache in his chest when he saw her eyes, those eyes that had to hide every time the world walked past without ever stopping. "So, what will you do?" he asked. "I don't want the spotlight. I just want to help," Rosa said. "Then let me help you," Aaron replied firmly. "No one gets to take this from you, not again." Rosa hesitated, then slowly nodded. For the first time in her life, she let someone step into the world she'd always kept hidden, a world of intellect buried beneath a blue uniform and the scent of floor cleaner. That afternoon, in the 6th-floor boardroom of the Langford Institute, sunlight streamed through high-pressure glass panels, casting light on thick stacks of folders and the tense faces of department heads. At the head of the table, Dr. Elizabeth Rowe, Langford's director, adjusted her glasses and said, "Professor Blake, you have 3 minutes to convince us that our hallway janitor just solved the most important equation of the century." Aaron nodded. He pressed a button. A large screen displayed security footage. Rosa writing out the solution on the board, fluid and flawless. The sound of chalk on the board echoed like the knock of a truth no one wanted to face. When the video ended, the room was silent. No one spoke. Only the director's eyes moved, from Aaron to Rosa, who sat at the end of the table, hands resting lightly on her knees, back straight, but eyes cautious. Ms. Matthews, the director said. Do you understand exactly what you've done? Yes, Rosa replied. I saw the professors were stuck and I thought, maybe I could try. Do you have any academic qualifications? No, ma'am. I learned from what others threw away. The director leaned back. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a rare sight in this boardroom. We have a genius disguised as a janitor, she said softly, but the words hit like thunder. The room exhaled. But not even 3 seconds later, a voice cleared at the far end of the table. Professor Franklin Moore, arms folded, eyes sharp as steel. Or we have a very elaborate fraud. The air in the boardroom froze at Moore's words. He was a legend at Langford. 40 years of research, 2-time Fields Medal nominee. When he spoke, people listened. Not out of fear, but because he was rarely wrong. With all due respect, Moore said, voice like a scalpel, we're putting the credibility of a top research institute in the hands of someone who's never set foot in a university classroom. Rosa didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, unblinking, unwavering. We have the footage, the solution, the handwriting, Aaron countered. There's no sign of fraud. She could have copied it. Or someone could have helped her. Moore crossed his arms. I want to see her prove it, in front of me. Director Rowe looked at Rosa, voice calm but firm. Ms. Matthews, are you willing to do that? A breath. The room was thick with waiting. Suspicion, curiosity, hope. Rosa nodded. I'll prove it. On any whiteboard in front of anyone. Moore squinted. Good. We'll prepare a test problem, not Kessler, but a current problem from Cavendish. Unpublished. No one outside the board knows it. Aaron stood abruptly. That's an advanced level problem. It's not even taught yet. And if she's the genius you all claim she is, Moore said coldly, she'll handle it. Rosa clenched her hands, sweat in her palms, but her voice remained steady. I accept. The silence after that was like a verdict signed, or the start of a new chapter. 3 days later, a special conference room at the top of Langford, usually reserved for institutional summits, became the stage for an unprecedented exam. At the center, a complex system of equations never before published. An advanced variation on infinite sequences in Hilbert space provided directly by the Cavendish Institute. No solutions, no hints, no chance to look it up. Present in the room were top faculty, the director, academic assistants, and representatives from the National Science Council. Rosa entered, wearing a plain white shirt and black slacks. No uniform, no cart. Just herself, and the chalk placed at the center table. Professor Moore stood, walked to the board, and wrote the first 3 lines of the problem, then turned. Begin. The room held its breath. 3 cameras recorded from different angles. Blank paper lay on standby. No one was allowed to approach her during the attempt. Rosa picked up the chalk. Once again, steady. She skimmed the entire problem in less than a minute, then began to write. The room filled with the soft sound of chalk, like early rain on a tin roof. Each line led naturally to the next. She didn't erase, didn't hesitate. Only paused for a few seconds at logical forks, then continued like the map was already in her head. 1 hour passed. She stepped back, the final symbol, QED. Silence fell. Moore approached, reading from top to bottom. His eyes widened. His hand froze mid-air. He turned to the board, voice low. She's correct. No one moved. Not a cough, not even a rustle of paper. Only the cameras captured slow breaths. Rosa stood before the board, fingers dusted in chalk, no longer looking at the solution, but at the people. The ones who used to look through her now watched her like she'd rewritten the definition of intelligence. Dr. Victor Lee was the first to speak. He walked to the board, scanned each line, and paused where Rosa executed a dimensional transformation no one had dared attempt. You used an inverse mapping in a domain of non-uniform convergence, he murmured. This isn't in any textbook. Because I didn't learn from textbooks, Rosa replied softly. I learned from mistakes, from discarded drafts, from what professors called not worth teaching. To me, they were gold. Director Rowe nodded slowly, eyes still locked on the board. This isn't just a solution. It's a new direction. Moore remained still, his hands no longer folded, his expression unreadable, but his silence now held something different. Not contempt, but acknowledgement. At last, he turned to Rosa and said, "You don't need to prove anything else. You just did something only 1 in 1,000 humans to ever live could do." Rosa didn't smile. She simply nodded and stepped away from the board, and left that world, the one she was never allowed into, finally facing her on its knees. The moment Rosa set the chalk down, the room seemed to stop breathing. Professor Franklin Moore, the man who had once coldly demanded she prove she wasn't a joke, now stood in front of the whiteboard, eyes twitching slightly as if each of Rosa's lines had carved into his pride. He said nothing for 3 full minutes. Then slowly, he turned to the room. "You are no amateur." One sentence, one nod, but it struck like thunder. Dr. Nina Caldwell blinked. Tears had silently run down her cheeks. Dr. Lee sat down, head in his hands. Aaron simply looked at Rosa, silent, eyes red, not from science, but something deeper. Grief. Grief for a genius hidden for 3 years behind a cleaning uniform. What did she do wrong? No degree? Her skin color? Or was it just no one imagined a black woman could solve what an entire institute couldn't? A question now posed to you, the one watching this video. Do you believe true talent can be buried, simply because of background? Or do you believe that genius will always eventually be seen? Comment 1 if you've seen someone gifted be overlooked because they weren't the right fit. Or 2 if you believe talent always finds a voice. Rosa didn't cry, but something melted behind her eyes. Not pride, not anger, but release. Release from 3 years of silence, a lifetime of dismissal, and finally, recognition. Not out of pity, but because she had made the entire council bow with sheer brilliance. She used to clean the whiteboard so others could begin. Today, she wrote her own future on it, and, for the first time, the world went silent to listen. Less than 24 hours after the historic test, the name Rosa Matthews flooded conference rooms, internal emails, then spilled out of Langford's gates like a wave. A 47-second clip from security footage capturing Rosa writing the final solution on the board was leaked online. Within a single night, it surpassed 8 million views. Headlines on major outlets screamed, "Black janitor solves $10 million problem. Science bows to anonymous genius." CNN, BBC, The New York Times. Even TikTok influencers and podcasts joined the coverage. They called her everything. The janitor who redefined math. The genius without a diploma. The Rosa Matthews phenomenon. But Rosa, she still showed up at Langford on time, rode the same old bus from Willow Creek, and brewed her black coffee. No sugar, as always. She didn't chase the spotlight, but the spotlight found her. Aaron received hundreds of interview requests on her behalf. Most were declined. Because Rosa only had one message. "I didn't do it to be famous. I just didn't want the solution to be ignored, like I once was." And from that moment forward, the door the world once slammed in Rosa's face began to open. Not because they forgave her background, but because they could no longer deny her. But where light travels, shadows always follow. As Rosa's name made its way onto national television, negative articles and comments began to appear, scattered at first, then thick like dark clouds after a blistering day. Some conservative scholars spoke up on academic forums. This is just a media phenomenon. One solution doesn't erase the rigor of formal academia. Did she really do it alone? Anonymous blog posts spread with provocative headlines. Did Langford invent a genius janitor to boost donations? Camera footage could have been staged. Too good to be true? Rosa read it all silently, but inside she wasn't surprised. She was used to being doubted, used to being overlooked, used to working twice as hard just to be believed half as much. Aaron, on the other hand, couldn't stay calm. "How can they deny something so clearly true?" he said, when a Yale professor hinted she might have had AI assistants. Director Rowe issued an official statement confirming the validation process: independent review, triple-angle footage, handwriting match, and step-by-step verification of each calculation. Still, the doubt simmered, not because logic failed them, but because what they couldn't accept was this: that someone like Rosa dared to stand as their equal. Yet in the storm, Rosa stood unshaken. Because for people like her, the real triumph isn't in applause, but in staying upright amidst all the head shakes. Langford held an official press conference the following Monday, a large room filled with reporters, cameras, microphones, and pressure. Rosa Matthews stepped up to the podium, surrounded by flashing lights and lenses. For the first time in her life, she was no longer anonymous. Her eyes scanned the crowd, part awe, part skepticism, and part waiting for her to stumble. "Ms. Matthews," a silver-haired journalist from the Washington Post asked first, "can you prove that the solution is yours? Any documents beyond the video?" Rosa looked directly at him. "No documents, just a whiteboard. And me." Another reporter interjected, "You have no degree, you've never attended a conference, never published a paper. Do you really think you're qualified to enter academia?" Rosa paused half a second, then said slowly, firmly, "I didn't enter. I've been here all along. I worked at the bottom of the whiteboard. You just never bent low enough to see me." The room fell silent. A young journalist whispered a quiet, "Wow," from the back row. "Where did you learn?" another voice asked. Rosa smiled softly. "From mistakes, from discarded pages, from forgotten books. I learned from everything this system deemed worthless." Her answer sent a ripple through the room, not from the scholars, but from the ones behind the cameras, the stagehands, the note-takers, the ones the world often forgets. Rosa didn't ask to be recognized. She made it impossible not to, not with a scream, but with truth that couldn't be denied. That day, the media didn't just report on a math genius. They wrote, "Rosa Matthews didn't just solve a problem, she shattered the architecture of academic power." No academic board needed. It was the young who rose first. Just 2 days after the press conference, the wall outside Langford's library was covered with hundreds of handwritten notes. Yellow, white, pale blue slips, each one a message. "You gave me a reason not to drop out. For the first time, I feel like I belong here. I'm the first in my family to dare love math." These weren't from top scholars or straight-A students, but from the quietest ones. First-year students on partial scholarships. International students with no clear status. Those who were once told, "You're not smart enough for this." A group of math majors hosted a spontaneous forum titled The Rosa Equation, where they shared stories of inequality in lecture halls and the myth that genius must come with pedigree, degrees, or elite university names. In a video that went viral, a young black student looked into the camera and said, "I was about to leave math. I didn't think I belonged. But then I saw her. If Rosa Matthews can stand before the council with nothing but her mind, then I can stand at the whiteboard and write my piece too." Not everyone understood Rosa's solution, but everyone understood this. She didn't just solve a problem. She solved the silence of millions who'd been dismissed. And from that moment on, Rosa Matthews wasn't a phenomenon. She was a symbol. 3 weeks after the press conference, a thick envelope arrived on Director Rowe's desk. From the Cavendish Institute itself, once a fortress for only the world's most credentialed mathematicians. Inside was no polite letter, but a formal invitation to Rosa Matthews. It included a full, unconditional scholarship, a special research position at the Applied Mathematical Physics Lab. Her choice, complete a thesis or lead her own project. That afternoon, Rowe placed the letter on Rosa's desk as rain drizzled outside. Cavendish isn't inviting Langford's janitor, she said gently. They're inviting mathematical genius Rosa Matthews. Rosa picked up the envelope. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but because this was something no dream had ever dared include. Aaron entered at that moment. Seeing the letter, he said only, "They finally did the right thing, but they're late." Rosa looked at him. In her eyes, the whole past behind her. The trash bins full of homework, the scrub brushes, the sleepless nights outside room 412. She whispered, more to herself, "It's not that I didn't deserve it. I just thought no one would ever see me." Aaron smiled warmly. "They see you now, and they'll never forget." That evening, Rosa sat alone on the rooftop of her old boarding house in Willow Creek. The distant city blurred in mist, and the streetlights flickered like breathing memories. In her hands was the letter from Cavendish, a letter most would trade their careers to receive. But Rosa didn't smile. She didn't sign. She stared at it like reading a foreign language. For 3 years, Langford had been where she scrubbed stairs, memorized chalk dust, and rebuilt herself from fragments others threw away. And Willow Creek, as rough as it was where her mother once saved for her first computer from a flea market, where she learned to count using food stamps. Leaving meant letting go of all those invisible pieces of her. Aaron arrived with 2 cups of black coffee. As always. He didn't ask her choice. He just sat beside her. "You know," Rosa whispered, "they call me a symbol now, but I never wanted to be one. I just wanted to do math. And now you can, where you belong. But what about Langford? What about the others like me, still wiping down whiteboards every night?" Aaron met her eyes. "You don't have to stay to represent them. You just need to go, and leave the door wide enough for them to walk through after you." Rosa bowed her head. Tears fell, not from pain but from knowing. The right choice is rarely the easy one, but it was time to move forward. Not to leave the past behind, but to carry it and turn it into something no one could ever ignore again. That day, Rosa Matthews returned to Langford, not in her janitor's uniform, nor yet in a lab coat or researcher badge. She wore a simple dress. In her hand, an old cloth tote bag. Inside it, the gloves she'd used for 3 years, not to clean, but to pass on. Along the hallway, students who once walked past her unseen now stepped aside and bowed their heads. On the math department bulletin board, someone had written with marker, "Reject the dream others wrote for you. Write your own formula." Rosa Matthews. Room 412, the old battleground, remained untouched. The board was clean, but faint chalk traces still lingered in the corner, remnants of a mental earthquake no one could erase. Rosa entered, looked around. A long breath. She took from her tote the old cleaning cloth, placed it gently on the teacher's desk. Beside it, she left a small note. "Never underestimate the one silently listening to your lecture." As she left, Rosa didn't look back, because this time, she knew, no one would dare turn their back on her again. Langford, once her ceiling, had now become her launch pad. The following month, the early train from Langford departed at 5:45 a.m. In the last car, among passengers with headphones, closed eyes, or eyes on screens, Rosa Matthews sat quietly, notebook on her lap. The cover, an old pizza box, folded into shape. Inside, hundreds of equations written in blue ink, some smudged, some torn, but every symbol a step she had taken. Cavendish waited at the end of the line. Once a remote dream she printed lecture notes from in secret, now. It called her name. The train passed through foggy fields and fading towns. Rosa gazed out the window, then gently closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to listen, to the sound of her father walking out, her mother's quiet sighs in the kitchen, the brush scrubbing late into the night, chalk against the board, and her own voice, the one no one cared to hear, now echoing, with no mic needed. She didn't bring her past to show off. She brought it so she'd never forget that every number she ever wrote was paid for in loneliness, in silence, in faith in what no one else could see. The train accelerated. Ahead, Cavendish. Behind her, Langford. Willow Creek. 3 nameless years. And now, she no longer needed anyone to say her name. She had found her voice. The main building of the Cavendish Institute stood like a fortress of knowledge. Ivory columns, soaring glass domes, and stone steps once climbed in confident silence by the world's greatest minds. Today, Rosa Matthews climbed them, not as someone cleaning after brilliance, but as brilliance itself. She was introduced to the academic board. No objections. Some who once doubted her now bowed slightly as they shook her hand, eyes down. Her special research position was placed in the Nonlinear Systems Lab, a space for theories without names to bloom. She entered her new office. Empty, clean, oak desk, a window facing the western forest. She hung on the wall an old whiteboard, transferred from Langford by personal request. On it, she wrote her first line in soft chalk. Not all solutions come from classrooms. Some come from those who used to clean them. Below it, she pinned a black and white photo. A young woman in a janitor's uniform, holding a piece of chalk, standing before the old room 412 board. No caption, no CV. The image said it all. That afternoon, a group of first-year students arrived. They brought notebooks, pens, and eyes filled with reverence and hunger. "Will you teach us?" a bright-eyed girl asked. Rosa smiled. "No, I won't teach you. I'll show you how to redraw the map of the world that forgot to include you." Rosa's equation was no longer about numbers. It was about possibility, presence, and justice, and she was redrawing it, one quiet line of chalk at a time. At a spring conference at Cavendish, Rosa Matthews was invited to speak before hundreds of students and global scholars. The lights shone on her face, no longer shy, no longer hiding in the shadows. She began with a simple story. "I was once the girl in the back row. No one asked if my answer was right. No one invited me to speak. I used to clean the classroom, not sit in it." The room held still. Rosa paused, scanning every face. Her eyes didn't say, "I won." They said, "I'm still part of you." "But I learned something. You don't need to be accepted to begin. You just have to refuse to believe the world when it tells you you're not enough." She smiled. "Talent has no gender, no skin color, no diploma requirement to begin, just a chance to be heard." Rosa stepped down. The room rose in applause, but the claps weren't for a media star. They were for the millions still brilliant in places no one's looking. You've just heard a story lived by thousands. People dismissed because they didn't walk through the front door. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever thought you didn't belong, then Rosa Matthews' story was written for you. Share this video with someone who feels left behind. Hit subscribe to help uncover more untold stories. Because sometimes, the ones who change the world are the same ones who once silently cleaned the whiteboard so it could begin. You could be the next Rosa. Just never stop believing you can.